So welcome to everybody listening now and in the future. This is one of our wonderful free talks with Robin Grille. Robin has been an instructor in the pre and perinatal healing online since I started in 2019, and someone I met earlier when I worked for the Association for Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health. He's a very popular speaker, and he has written several books. So I'll just read I have a very short bio for you, Robin.
Okay.
Robin Grille is an Australian psychologist and parenting educator. His articles on parenting and child development have been widely published and translated in Australia and around the world. Robin's first book, Parenting for a Peaceful World, received international acclaim and led to speaking engagements around Australia, USA, UK, Canada, Indonesia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. His second book, Heart to Heart Parenting, is also available in German and Korean. Robin's work is animated by his belief that humanity's true nature is largely dependent on the way we collectively relate to our children. Inner Child Journeys, How Our Children Grow Us Up, is his newest title. Robin's experiential, skills-based, and informational parenting courses have helped many people to embrace parenting as a transformative personal growth journey. Drawing from 28 years clinical experience and from leading-edge neuropsychological research, Robin's seminars and courses focus on healthy emotional development for children as well as parents, while building supportive, cooperative parenting communities. You can see more about him and his books, videos, resources, plus other services at robingrille.com. So please go ahead, Robin.
And thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate and Brett, for holding the space together. Really appreciate working with you guys. Oh my goodness, I've been looking forward a lot to this moment, and it feels quite big for me because the topic is something that's been nagging at me from the inside for a very long time. So let's jump right in. I'm thinking about the human experience of bliss, ecstasy, and those transcendental states of being that involve this indefinable sense of losing our edges and feeling a sense of unity. And I don't believe that that's like an on or off binary experience. You either have it or you don't. I think there's grades, there's approximations, and I invite you to think about what flavors, what tastes of those experiences you may have stumbled into in your life, whether deliberately or quite surprisingly and by accident. And it's bothering me more and more and more that in the general, usual mainstream psychology spaces, the conversation around that is so limited, so small, so absent. It does happen, and there are areas of psychology, but why do they seem to be on the margins and radical? Why is when in fact this is such an ordinary, potentially ordinary aspect of human experience for which we are neurologically wired up, like waking and sleeping and laughing and dancing, you know. It occurs to me that we have been asking for way too little and settling for way too little. And this concerns me on the level of the personal as well as on the level of relationship, all the way out to the societal and planetary. In parallel with our you know, very, very pallid psychologies that consider us to be healthy, I find it almost laughable as well as disappointing and tragic and sad. we carry like these unspoken, unexamined definitions of health that are about being happy. You know, did you have a happy childhood? Are you happy? As if we all know what that means, and as if we all share the exact same definition of what that means. And we use diagnostics that we completely copied from medicine about wrong, about ill, and that you're ill, you're mentally ill. The flip side, you're healthy when you're declared to have an absence of symptoms, and that will do. You can go home now. And oh my God, that's just loose change. I can't deal with that. I won't settle for that. Why would you? Why? So in parallel to that, there are, you know, the dominant societal, you know, the unquestioned societal acceptances is right now I'm thinking of a document that I actually really like. I really like, and I think it represented a huge leap forward in social evolution. The United States Bill of Rights, and when there's something in there about the pursuit of happiness. And now the pursuit of happiness has an implication, if you read between the lines, is to do with, you know, the right to accumulate and the right to own and to have a proprietal relationship, an objectification, a non-relationship to the stuff that you will own, your property, and we, you know, this is quite shared. It underwrites the orthodox economies of the world. There was also the French Bill of Rights and the protection of the individual. So I'm going to be flipping from the personal to the political because I don't know the separation between the two. And if I'm talking about the I that is we, it doesn't make sense to only speak of the personal. I want you to think about the implications with me. The economics that is now the global orthodoxy, and thou shalt not question this. Thou shalt not question this, says the Church of Economics, is the neoliberal economics, which is based on this axiom by a bloke called Adam Smith, lovely Scottish fellow. He said so many great things, but the folk of neoliberalism just narrowed it down to this one, which is that human beings are defined by our pursuit of self-interest. We've been living off of that. We live and breathe it. Our schools, our jobs, our health systems, the way that we go and do our shopping and buy our food, and the clothes that we wear, every aspect of our life. This is where personal and societal are perfectly indivisible. Makes no sense to separate one from the other. It all comes from this shared and not challenged idea that the only thing that we are is the separate individual. Happiness comes from the accumulation of property. So how's that going for us right now? Because the advantages have been great, and I want to honor that. I want to honor that. Believe it or not, as horrible as things are in the world right now, they are the best that they have been in 10,000 years since sedentary civilization began, in terms of violence and in terms of abundance. I have to honor that because the research on that is just solid as. And I like it. I'm happy for it. Speaking for myself, if I have a self. Simultaneously, we are driving off a cliff and accelerating. We've destroyed, you know, if you care about any other species, we are decimating them. We're stripping our mother bare. And if you scratch the surface of economics, no less a language will do. It is the economics of rape, and it has been for 10,000 years. Rape is taking without asking and giving nothing back. By that definition, that's what we've been up to. Based on this idea that you're separate individual, separate, and happiness comes from the accumulation of property, having stuff and then getting more of it. And we're about to commit ecocide, and we're minutes away from that. And for all the good things that are happening, I've been looking it up, the emissions keep going up. They're not slowing down yet. So it hasn't been working, and everything is up for revision. But I don't see things changing other than changing from the inside out. A radical and absolute overhaul of the most foundational operating system of our identity. Who are we, and how do we operate in the world? Out of that come the technologies and the institutions and the economics and the politics that are of heart to heart life. So I wanted, take a step to the left and to the right. To the left, because such is the paradox. Do you have a left leg or do you have a right leg? What a confusing paradox that is. You only move because the left leg exists because of the right leg, and the right leg moves because of the left leg. It's not this or that, it's this because of that, and that because of this. That's the resolution of paradox. So here comes the beginning of a little paradox. I want to defend the importance of individuality. I think we've done a good thing to nail that one down. Anyone that does relationship counseling, couples counseling, you soon understand that enmeshment is the greatest problem, and that establishing strong boundary and a separate individual state, that we are separate from one another, that's where love comes from. If we're unprepared for that paradox, we're going to have a great deal of confusion and trouble. So we have to have the separate individuality. When I talk about developmental stages in early childhood, as I will do in the course that I will tell you about towards the end, it's this essential developmental stage. As we move out of babyhood into toddlerhood, it's all about differentiation, that what you feel isn't me, what you need isn't me, what I need and feel is not you. So it's a developmental stage. And our health depends on it, well-being depends on it, our bliss depends on it. However, there's this other dimension of our beingness, which is that in which our boundaries dissolve and the I is lost into we-ness. And that does not only apply to relationships with other humans, but relationships with all life. I'm inspired by all of the people that I've heard from who have accidentally, rarely on purpose, dropped into the most profound states of what used to be called enlightenment. It's called enlightenment because part of the symptom is that you see a lot of light. Another part of the symptom is the remembering that tree and I and this thing that gets called Robin are one thing. And this experience of peak bliss and ecstasy and unity consciousness are one thing. there are two things to say about this one experience. The best metaphor that I can come up with in my inadequate state of lack of advancement spiritually is the metaphor of an ocean. Every wave on the ripple on the top of the ocean is like a fingerprint, like a human, utterly unrepeatable. No wave will ever be the same. At the top, you see lots of individual separate waves, and they must behave separately in order to be beautiful, in order to contribute to the whole. Go down a little bit, you already start to see the unity. Go down deeper, and there's only one ocean. That's the metaphor. So our individuality and our we-ness, that there's only one organism talking right now, and this, and it's not me, it's not Robin, it's all of us. That's a question of where the awareness is. It's a question of state. And I'll declare a little more right now that our stuckness in trying to be happy as separate individuals, that is a developmental arrest that comes out of childhood wounding and trauma, that we got stuck. There's a degree to which emotionally we got stuck in an incomplete toddlerhood, you can say, or incomplete adolescence as well. A time in adolescence in which we are deeply preoccupied and concerned with identity politics, where it's important to know which group and which gang you belong to, and if you're one of these or if you're one of those. It's so important in adolescent life. And as adolescents, we must pass through that. And how beautiful and how necessary our well-being, our joy is dependent on passing through that fully and well with support. However, staying stuck in that, it's creating so many of our problems. Especially the severely dangerous illusion that because I'm separate from that piece of land over there and it's a thing, that nothing happens when I exploit it and give nothing back to it. And this is how we perish. Would that be so? This is how we genocide our animal family. And we've done so much of that already. And I'm really troubled by some of the heroism, the heroic kind of injunctions that come out of new age pop psychology, where you're usually spoken to through a Facebook meme that's shaking the finger and saying, you can't expect any goodies unless you learn to love yourself. And books, heroic books with titles like The Power of One. Now there is this is the paradox where we walk with both legs, not one. There's an aspect of which that is true. There's an aspect of which that's silly in a damaging way. And a perfect way to deny the vulnerability of interdependency and the vulnerability of interconnectedness. And I think we admonish each other to go do it by yourself, and we do that as a kind of a defensive reaction against the stranglehold of codependency, which feels so awful for all of us. What we mostly dislike is other people's codependencies on us. And we get a little bit embarrassed about our own. How's that going so far? Have I lost anyone? So when I say you're actually not an individual, you have individuality, right? You have a sense of humor. You have freckles. Love all of it. You have an individuality. And you need it. You'd have a hard time without it, but you have it. You aren't one. Neither am I. Neither am I. I don't know about you. I find that such a threatening, terrifying thought. I also find it like the most comforting thought at the same time. What part of me is getting frightened? What part of me is getting like elated, like I'm coming home, like a relief, a relief. I want to ask just a quick question, particularly those of you that are a little older. What does a little older mean? Over 47 and a half years of age. Have you ever found yourself feeling a little bit tired of being yourself, even if you really like who you are, but just a little bit of tired of the sameness of being you? You wake up and you go, oh, there's those thoughts that I always have, and there's those reactions that I did. Have you ever felt that way? Bless you to pieces. We couldn't do without you, as unique as you are. We absolutely could not do this without you. And at the same time, once you've been around living in yourself, if you survive long enough, you start to go, oh God, that's tiring. Oh God, some more Robin grilling to do. I've been doing that too long. And you want a holiday from yourself. You just want a holiday, a break. So this is the bit that pisses me off. How come our mainstream psychologists treat bliss, unity consciousness, which is basically bliss. Bliss is really, I think, the taste, the flavor that unity has. That's what unity tastes like or smells like. Bliss, ecstasy, that kind of realm. Joy is probably an approximation. I'm not going to get real tight on defining it because I don't know how. And I don't want to smudge your own definitions. Why does our psychology treat that like this bonus? Why does our mainstream treat it like, oh yeah, I mean, we narrow it, we box it into peak experience, and yeah, this is the other bullshit thing is that it's up to mystics. If you go and kind of do yoga in a cave for about 400 years, and stop eating, stop enjoying yourself, definitely no sex, none of that, and you're going to have these peak experiences, and you'll come out feeling very holy and telling people to stop enjoying their life so that you can be blissful. We'll leave it to the mystics. But I've met so many people that are just not mystics. It happened by accident when they're least expecting it. I could name them for you, and they just drop into this experience. So many people, and they weren't interested. None of these people, most human beings, this is an ordinary experience. And it's just people, 99% of folks that drop into this state of unity and bliss, oh my goodness, I'm that tree is me. I'd forgotten that, but I'm remembering something that was always there. They're not interested in being gurus or teaching anything to anyone. They're just not interested. They're not charismatic, and they go back to their business. They go back and drive their taxi. That's it. You never hear from them. And when I sit with these people, they cry because they say, I don't know how to describe that. My vocabulary just doesn't cover it. And it's very frustrating because I'm so full of love in my heart when I go to that place and I want to share it. I'm lost for words. Okay. So it's an ordinary experience that comes to you if you're intelligent, if you're unintelligent, if you're a loving person and a caring person, or if you're an asshole. I assure you of that. Or if you're, an erudite person or not. And it can come from a lot of meditation. It can also come from being ill, or from something falling on your head, or from eating a delicious dessert, from reading beautiful poetry and being moved, from lovemaking, giving birth to a child, being pregnant, walking in the forest, surfing, music. And it's not on or off. We start experiencing edges of that place. It's universal, okay? It's in our neurology. About time our psychologists came to terms with that place. So the pursuit of happiness is pretty paltry. The pursuit of our neurological, biological birthright of unity, availability, access to unity consciousness, because it never sustains. It is a place that we fall into and then come out of again. Access to availability to bliss, ecstasy, unity consciousness. Pursuit of that, let's put that in the Bill of Rights, because it's incomplete. And let's put that in the definition of health, because that's woefully incomplete. And then we realize that the benefit of the one and our separate, unrepeatable individuality works for the whole, and our dropping into the whole and what benefits the whole works for the one. So there's this dance. It's exciting to me to see that the sciences are becoming, they're taking steps out of the linear and out of the fine point and out of the linear causality with that causes that. We're starting to accept fractalism, complexity. I listened to a biologist speak who said, it is no longer considered correct in biology, in the new biology, that the individual is the unit of life. It's false. The relationship is the unit of life. So the old models of biology are now, we're realizing that they're limited, they fail us. We need to expand our understanding. That really captured my attention. And then you talk to the quantum people, you've heard them a million times by now, you know, we don't end at the skin. And then you understand the beautiful brain sciences of empathy, and that we are wired to feel what the other person feels. A piece of what you feel is what I feel in my body from a distance. It's recorded in my brain, in our mirror neurons, etc. And probably by now you've heard that. This a re-understanding of this thing of identity is really happening in all fields of life. The separate sciences and faculties are waking up to the fact that they're neutered as silos, and there's a kind of interdisciplinary conviction these days. I always think, how can you possibly be an anthropologist unless you're also a psychologist? If you can't work together, how can you study societies without understanding, you know, relationship and individual, and vice versa, and vice versa. And then there's that beautiful work around discovering that what we thought was a tree is not, because trees are joined by the mycelia underground. Are you all familiar with that? You've seen that. Do you notice that when you hear this material being spoken, it's it's a joyful, really uplifting dialogue. And the people that talk about fungi and mycelia and how all of the trees talk to each other and help each other, and there's like this one giant organism, how happy they are. They're ecstatic. They're like overjoyed children as they speak. Do you notice that? The more unified we get, the more blissed out we get. How interesting. I had this odd experience. I'm not a green thumb by any chance, but I've been really trying hard to be. And I remember when the first time many years ago, when I created a worm farm to put all our kitchen scraps in so that we can then create worm castings and feed worms, but then out of that, feed our garden and grow vegetables, etc. And I took the lid off one day of my worm farm to give my kitchen scraps to the worms. And I looked at these worms, and the thought penetrated my mind of circularity, of a giving that never stops. The disappearance of this illusion of waste, that there's a thank you that goes all the way around, that what displeases us is welcome by these ecstatic little worms who are saying, thank you. And then the worms poo. And then in the plant, they'll give that to the vegetables, and the vegetables goes, oh my God, this is fantastic. It's like chocolate cake. I'm growing from circularity. I stood before this worm farm and I could feel tingles through my body and this upwelling of joy in my heart that, you know, my cultured mind couldn't make sense of. Why am I so happy? Because of my worms. But it's not the worms. It's, you know, my rigid and armored little self starting to be penetrated by the memory of continual circularity and basically unified systems as the base of life. So it's happening in the sciences as well. How about that? There's a tree, and sometimes it's useful to think of tree. At the same time, there's no such thing as a tree. That only happens if you look above the ground, above the soil. There's a forest, there's a system. But then this thing is endless. It goes deeper. Now scientists are starting to discover that there's a dynamic interchange between birds and trees. And this is just one tiny little example of how the thing works, is that when birds sing, that triggers some processes in trees that you know, generating their germination of flowers or whatever it might be. And so that there's a constant. Where do we get separate? I'm not sure. Where do you, it just depends on where you draw the line. So there's no such thing as a tree. There's a tree bird, you could say, bird tree. No such thing. And then one person on the road to enlightenment recently said the famous phrase, there's no such thing as a baby. There's no such thing as a baby. It's a temporary part of the sentence between two punctuation marks. There's a mother baby. Actually, I'm not happy with that. There's no such thing as a mother baby. And you can guess where I'm going to next. Can you? I'm sure you can. So here's the sort of big errors that we make when we fixate on individual psychology. Or yeah, when we fixate on that. You know, remember what I was saying, super important, but not only. Oh my God, not only. The kinds of errors that happen. Let's talk about even in the practice of well-being and health. Now, I read this fantastic book called by Dr. Rupa Maria, who's a professor of medicine from Berkeley University. I wish I'd gone to Berkeley. Rupa Maria, professor of medicine. The book is called Inflamed. It's about that in medicine, basically, the old model of the germ theory is old and defunct. It's linear. The germ caused the illness. You take a pill for the ill, then you get better. There's truth in that, but it's woefully inadequate. The new model of medicine, which is there in academia, but there's going to be a lag before it becomes the practice, is about the inflammation model. And right there, it ceases to make sense to only treat the individual, because inflammatory systems are societal. Family, society, and childhood history. She gives the example of the woeful inadequacy of saying to somebody, you know, with diabetes or obesity, you need to go on a diet. Here's your diet, go home and do your diet. And that there's a violence in that. There's a helpfulness to it. There is also a violence. And this is why nutritional experts can tell you that there is a dramatically low collaboration by their patients. That person you've just sent home with a photocopied list of things that they can't eat, by the time they've left your office, will be incessantly and remorselessly bombarded by it's not just the overt advertising, it's the subliminal, which, if you understand how it works, it is extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. Nobody spends millions of dollars of advertising without knowing that they're going to get triple that at the other end. And that's not all, the entire culture and the cultural associations that we've had. It makes no sense to treat the individual. We must treat the environment alongside it. It makes no, and that's in every sphere. It doesn't make sense to treat the tree. I have to treat the soil and the friends of the tree. It makes no sense to treat that little forest. They have to treat the communities around it, so that they stop sending their cats into it at night to eat the animals, and etc., 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 etc. Conclusion here is that growth is not personal. Growth is shared. Shame is shared. Fear is shared. We are given the shame of our forebears. You think you feel your own shame. You're feeling, if you can imagine 100 people holding a piece of a parachute, you're holding your end. You're holding that end. And the rest of us holding the other end. You know, I've been working as a psychotherapist for quite a bit of time, and one of the places in which I feel so helpless over the years, I have felt so helpless over the years, is, you know, we do this beautiful work together, and you know, the person sitting with me is really committed to learning, you know, better boundaries or better self-assertion, or learning to reach out, some kind of a way to live more fully. But then they go home and their family wasn't ready for these changes. And hang on a minute, I married that person, and where's all this coming from? So there's a resistance immediately. You know, if you're my friend, without intending to, but you've been training me to lean into this being you. And if you show up because you've had some therapy with somebody, or you attended a workshop and you change everything, are you just expecting that I'm going to move with you? Because sometimes that works beautifully, but so often it doesn't. And then our environment, the people surrounding us, push to resist and fit us back in the mold, to migrate us back to the role that we had declared ourselves to be into. That person that doesn't say no, or that person that can be relied upon to help too much, that kind of thing. Think of all of the et ceteras. So, I've been working with individuals and drawing this fraudulent line around them and hoping that can bring more happiness. And, sometimes, but I now understand so much more about the resistances, and I'm much more keen to invite the family, the friends, and to really encourage the people that I work with, if I'm working with one person, to include everybody in what their goals are in their therapy. That there's, darling, you're going to see me practicing some of this or trying out some of that, and I want to hear how that is for you. And I need your support for that too, and not just your don't resist me. I need your support, and please know that there's, I'm going to try to make some changes into the manner of our relationship, plural relationships. So to treat the tree, we need to treat its environment. So something happens when you cross out the word I and you put in the word we. That is very interesting and very exciting, I think. Very interesting and exciting. So much more empowering. I attended a talk by this wonderful economist, Helena Norbert Hodge, and she said a little phrase. Helena Norbert Hodge is an advocate. She's a documentary maker. She's an advocate of local economies. And she worked and lived in Tibet for a very, very long time and learned what she learned from there. She's a Swedish woman. She lives down the street from me. And The Economics of Happiness is her video, her movie. Well known around the world, did a TED talk. And she was talking to that place in which, as social activists, any of us that care about bringing the society that we have to change, there's a powerlessness. And then we said, what can I do? What can one person do? And you've heard that 7 billion times. You've heard that 8 billion times. What can I do? What can one person do? And the next thing that happens somatically is the shrugging of the shoulders. Like our arms have no place to go. And that's perfectly true until you realize whether you're not just an I. What happens, and this is what Helena said, cross out I and say we. Feel what happens. Cross out I and say we. Try that in a lot of spheres. Feel what happens. So there's a beautiful potential right now in that a lot of the nightmare that's going on around the world and the upheaval, this tremendous sense of undoing, deep undoing, and a precipitous, extraordinary, dramatic loss of trust in institutions around the world. Every survey says we don't trust the thing anymore. We're comfortable and we're happy that we have a washing machine and a car and a TV and a phone, and we've got the internet. But we don't trust organization, we don't trust authority, we don't trust institution. I mean, that's not true for everybody, of course, but it's in terminal decline, and there's conflict around it and polarization. Admittedly, social medias love polarization, feed off it, and exaggerate it. Nonetheless, it's happening. There's an undoing and an unraveling. And I think there's a widely shared belief, one that I like, that I participate in, that the direction of civilization is from that Adam Smithian civilization of self-interest and the primacy of the individual. That was necessary historically so that we don't get killed every time we have an opinion. But that was a step in our development. You can't stay a toddler. The direction, I feel, of the civilizational, this birth crisis that we're having is towards a civilization that emerges culturally out of the rediscovering and remembering of collective consciousness, interconnectedness, the interconnectedness of all things. And you can feel the symptoms of that awakening around the place. And the fear of that, the fear. One of the reasons for all this upsurge in fascism and Nazism around the world is because instinctively we know that our monoculturalism is as good as dead. It's terminal. National boundaries. We thought that we belonged to a nation. The nation state was invented 200 years ago. It was a complete fiction, total fiction. It has no more substance than a puff of smoke, and it's going. Cultural homogeneity is going. It's going willingly. It's going by intention. Oh my God, I'm in love with that person. We barely speak the same language. Too bad. We're going to have babies. Does that make you uncomfortable? Tough. And by the way, you know, one of my kids is gay, and the other one kid is going to be trans, and I don't understand any of it. But our boundaries aren't where they used to be. Now that is so deeply terrifying to many people. So that element of consciousness, of identity gripping onto identity, you know, I am lovable because of belonging to this one monoculture and identity. That's under mortal threat. It's fighting for its life, and it's fighting viciously, and that's why we're seeing this this backlash. It's I believe that it's the last mortal fight as we disappear into each other, in a sense. But that doesn't mean passively waiting for that. We all have a role to play in this, and it begins with knowing, remembering that deep source of we equals bliss equals unity. Remembering how to re-tap into that. How did we lose that? How did we lose that? Now, this is what we're going to be talking about. I'll mention briefly this training that we are doing with Kate and Brett. It's a 10-session online training that I'll be presenting, and I'm pretty excited about it, actually. It's called the 7 Rites of Passage. We're going to be looking at the 7 distinct critical foundational stages of development, of psycho-emotional development, from in utero through to end of adolescence at about 25, 24, 26. The distinct emotional stages, the different needs that arise in each of those stages. And then what are the implications for our lifespan, for our relationships, both of the strengths that we gain from having our needs met in each of those stages, but also the adaptations that our bodies create in defense to develop the abuses. One of the things that I enjoy a lot is not just looking at the implications for relationship, But how all of this is reflected in the societies that we've created, where you won't just see, oh, there's this violence going on or this power abuse going on. You will see the childhood roots of that, which that is an engine of compassion. It produces a natural reflex of compassion and a clarity of forward direction about where do we need to bring our children to, and where it brings us back to the access to those nourishing, essential, blissful unity states of being, of consciousness. I am rebelling against the mainstream psychology that says that is a bonus. I'm saying that it is necessary. Our health is much larger than what we thought it could be. Examples of how this bliss was lost to us is anyone who's under hypnosis remembered moments in the womb, that state of oneness, which is also blissful. Images of the face of the unborn baby is often like Buddha. I mean, sometimes it's stressful and terrifying and painful in the womb. It just depends on how the environment is treating the parents. Again, it's the whole environment. You know, when birth is undisturbed, when childbirth is unterrified by thousands of years of damaging patriarchal expectation and inculcation, with the exclusion of the didn't happen, always have, but in normal naturally designed childbirth, deep states of unity and bliss and ecstasy. They call it an ecstatic cocktail of hormones that is like a torrent through the body of mother, through the body of baby. And then the father, who we think is a separate individual, standing over here, gets dragged along to the same oxytocin rush. Everyone in the room, if you've ever had the immense privilege of somehow being part of natural childbirth. I used to take MDMA in my 20s. It felt like that. It felt like that. And what a relief to discover that I am not so important. I'm not that important. Do I have a high self-esteem? Do I have a low self-esteem? It's not that important. It's important, but it's not critical to bliss and joy. We pass through these things. And a baby in pleasure, being massaged and touched, the fullness of breastfeeding. They enter a state of climactic, delicious ecstasy. You see it in there. The way they drop their head back, usually towards the end of breastfeeding, provided that the environment is really nourishing to the mother. We can't separate. Remember, there's no mother baby, there's no such thing. There's a whole system of beings. Then there's this other very, very, very different ecstasy. The ecstasy of discovering your individual separateness and freedom that comes with toddlerhood. It is a rush of thrill, connection with self. I can do my own thing. I can drive my ship. See it in little kiddies, their joy when they're not punished and shamed, when they're not strangled by terrified parents who think that the kids will fall off a cliff. Well, basically, parents traumatized from their own ancestry and their own childhoods, basically. There's ecstasy also in freedom, connection with self. And as we become more robust, ecstasy in being alone, deep connection with self. And when you find you're alone and you get deeply connected with yourself, you start hearing deeper thoughts. And suddenly you don't know that those thoughts come from inside you. It gets unclear. You start to suspect that these thoughts are kind of shared. They're below the human. And why is that so blissful? So in the punishments and the shamings and the limitations, the excessive limitations, not the healthy boundaries, but the punishing, shame, and manipulations that come to the toddler, the deprivations of the baby, the shocks that come in childbirth, etc. All of those things, those shocks are so devastating and overwhelming that we protect and defend ourselves by learning how to not feel that unity. So the incapacity to drop into the state of bliss and unity, that's the adaptation that we carry. We are carrying this from our ancestry and as well as our own childhoods. And I mean, I'm delighted to discover that that's a symptom. It's not a forever stuckness, but it's a symptom, and it's the connection is reclaimable. It's reclaimable, maybe slowly, maybe gradually. For some people, suddenly your path is your own. And then, oh my goodness, in the primary school years and in adolescence, the bliss of vocation and the bliss of following your gift, the bliss, the incomparable bliss of entering into a flow state. And I will talk a lot about this in my rites of passage course. I will talk about how schools systematically and methodically are designed to circumcise flow state possibilities so that they will not happen for your 12 years in school. And the definition of a flow state, which is such a deeply, it's a deep, silent, calm flavor of bliss. The definition of flow state is that you lose your selfhood. You become one. You lost all of your normal embarrassments and shames and lack of self-confidence. Your ego gets dissolved and you drop into a oneness with your activity. And it can last for a while. In there, you also lose your track of time. Your time gets totally distorted. That's been studied very closely. I'm happy also that we've come into an era in which there are brain scan studies of people in bliss, in unity consciousness, and they're seeing what happens in the head brain. They're mapping it. They're mapping that there's a sudden drop in activity in the parietal lobe, in the temporal lobe, and in the frontal lobe, all of those places that are to do with self-awareness. That goes offline, and we enter the blissful state. The brain lights up quite differently in that deep alpha state. We hear much deeper thoughts, much more. It's about slowness too. It's about going slow. You notice how our lives in school and at work they have a built-in speed, because the way to keep people divided so you can conquer them is to keep them not just busy, but in a hurry. The hurry is one of the greatest tools of separating you from your bliss unity state, from your we, the part of I that is we. Now, I map all of those places of divorcement from the we bliss unity place that lives deep inside what we think is I. I map all of those places of loss in the rites of passage course. I map how to treat relationship, not just treat individual. So it's both. I map how to understand the state of affairs politically, socially, environmentally through the lens of the collective woundings to our we consciousness. That's not me mapping. I shouldn't have said it that way. I'm just kind of overjoyed by being able to show this map that I think is inherent, and that I am this lucky person that got to stumble on learnings from so many people that open up this map, and I've been playing with it all my work life. I love it. And it's knowing story, how story felt, the story of society, how we got to be where we are, is so parallel to the story of you and I, how we got to be where we are. What I'm excited about is understand that story. You are flooded with compassion. You don't have to try to be compassionate. You don't have to do like a compassion meditation in order to conjure up compassion. You're flooded with it. It hits you from behind when you understand that developmental story. Lastly, the direction becomes lit up beautifully. Where do we need to go and how? To remember that place of we, access to it, and out of that automatically comes inescapably, unavoidably, the creation of the economics and the politics, the technology, the institutions that are reflective of the I that is we, the we that is I. Interconnectedness as the foundational. So the new Adam Smith would be saying, happiness comes from self-fulfillment. Bliss and joy comes from interconnectedness and seeing each other and our beautiful non-human family being fulfilled as well. Happiness comes from having, the rascaliousness of us as individuals, getting stuff. But deep joy, bliss comes from giving. And we are hurting that has been cut from us in this shared story of wounding and trauma that created the civilization that we're trying to survive from. So here we are all together, survivors. And you're all invited to take the course that we're going to be doing, the Rites of Passage. Kate, we have that online. You can read about it. The advantage of joining us live is that you will get to ask questions. So you will drive the direction of the stuff that I'll be talking about, which I particularly enjoy. But also it will remain as an evergreen online course that you can, for a smaller price, you can just buy it down the track and listen to it at your own speed. In the meantime, I feel ready to stop the one-way talking and let go of the I and going into the we. And I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear, and I don't know how many of us are here today, but if you listen in to, do you have questions or something you're excited about? and we'll try to make it succinct in the interest of as many, or I'd like to hear from as many of you as possible with the time that we have left. That we got about 24 minutes and 17 seconds left. So
thank you, Robin. And yes, please ask your questions. You can put your hand up and we'll see your microphone. Ask the questions. We're a small enough group here. Or you can put your hand up and we'll call on you.
Dave,
Robin?
Yeah, great to see you, buddy.
Thank you. I was occasionally thinking, like that old Saul, like, where are you going with all this? You ever heard that one, you know?
Where are you going with all this?
Yeah, you kept talking and talking and talking, and I'm saying, where is he going with all this? And of course, you're talking about your online course, and you're saying that not only can people take it and be very interactive with it, but they could also just watch it. But I guess my question would be, where are you going with that? Meaning that, you know, you may end up with a certain number of people who are highly educated and cross-pollinated in ideas, you know, at the end of this 10 sessions, right? And then we're going to know what to do. But isn't there a next step where you package all of what you did and what you learned from doing it into some new product that then is more accessible and understandable by a larger number of people, maybe less educated, maybe less exposed to these ideas? Or otherwise, it's just going to be a nice little bubble like we have with, you know, improving birth, you know, which we've had for 20, 30 years. There's this nice little bubble of people who really understand, and we're great peers with each other, and we support each other about how birth should be different than the way it is in the modern Western maternity system, but it's stayed in that bubble.
Do you feel frustration about the bubble that sometimes doesn't even grow, but it shrinks? Do you feel frustration about that?
Yes, I do.
Gotcha. Yes,
I very much do. It's actually almost physically painful.
I hear you. Me too.
And the one thing that I taught one time at an APA conference, I actually told a little story about that. And I said, I think we have to grieve, because a lot of us had a really clear vision that this wasn't the way it was going to be, that the bubble was going to get bigger and bigger, and then it would eventually burst and, you know, change into other things that would, so that the bubble would have its effect throughout the culture.
Not only,
it's like a marriage that failed, you know, you have to grieve it. Even if you want it out because it was terrible, you still have to grieve it. And when I mentioned this in a group of about 30 people, a couple of people actually started to cry, but nobody ever said like, well, yeah, let's go and grieve it, or let's talk about it some more. They just wanted to quickly get away from that idea. They didn't disagree. They just didn't like it.
I want to address all of that, David. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your comment.
Was that a question?
I'm going to turn it into. I'm going to turn it into a question. On the one hand and on the other hand, for me, in terms of the bubbles, like every time I look out and I feel, you know, I got to tell you that I suffer from hope. I suffer from hope, and then feel like a heartbroken child, a heart shattered child, in that so many of my hopes and dreams of the, you know, like the example that you gave, the natural childbirth movement, I thought that by now it would be pressing on being universal, and then when I look out and it's the same people, and I've already met you, and I've already met you, and I've already met you, and I love you, but I wish there was, I wish I didn't know. I wish I was surrounded by strangers. I wish the place was flooded by strangers. And I find it shattering of my hopes. And related to that, you said, where am I going? I want to go to
Do you have a
where,
vision of where you're going when the course is over? And what
yes,
products may come out of the course?
no, yes and no. I said on the one hand, and on the other hand, didn't I? I warned you. Where I want to go is to be less alone, except in those times when I crave aloneness. And I'm really sick and tired of being alone from my animal friends as well. I'm tired of that. I'm over. It hurts me, and I want to go there. That's where I'm going. And I want friends to come with me. I want friends to lead me there. Lead me there. I'm stuck. That's all I care about. And I'm angry too. I'm angry as hell. I'm also terrified, Dave. I'm sometimes I lay awake at night thinking we're done. And it's not just grief for me. It's kind of like needing to accept that we actually might be done. We're going to burn up. The acceptance of death and all of it. We may not make it. Then this happens. Like my friend Helena said, what happens when you cross out I and you say we? Because when I pan out and look at the larger picture, specific movements usually fail. Look deeper, and larger changes happen slowly, but in an accelerated way in modernity. So that if I keep one eye on what I'm doing and the particular courses that I'm doing and the people I'm talking to, the organizations that I deal with, but the other eye on the larger social evolutionary trends that are actually refuse to be specific. They're kind of more like you're talking about a swell in the ocean rather than a wave. I actually get quite uplifted, and I'm trying not to invest hope in that because hope hurts me every time. I don't think hope, you do need to have hope. I'm not that excited by hope. I prefer to go with, no matter what the result is, if I'm going to be true to myself and live fully and burn my light fully, whether this works or doesn't, then stuff hope. I'll enjoy the hope when I have it. It always kills me when I lose it. It's more, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? What can you and I do? Let's play together. Let's play together. I actually trust the movements that are playful. I think they punch higher. So and I do see trends. And well, I don't have time here to name all of them, but I do see large trends. I agree with you that in the natural childbirth movement, it kind of stopped for a while, but you got to not think in personal lifetime time, because social movements take sometimes generations, sometimes centuries. Some things are accelerating now, but we can't bank on that. So I've had to learn, with all of the grief and the fear and the rage, to accept that many of the wishes that I have for the civilization that I want to see emerging won't happen in my lifetime. I'll die and it'll still be not there to the degree that I want. And I also know that when I try to script it, God laughs at me, not with me, but at me. So what's my role? And I like not playing alone in my role. I like having friends in it. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if the game is let's create a better world, a better society, we'll be playing that game whether it works or not. Because in the meantime, the one-to-one, the relationships benefit so much. So much. Now, that will do me. That will do me. I'm doing my tiny little piece. You know, I've got this course, I've got my video series that I've just done. My focus is my life's passion is about change childhood and you change the world. It happens. It's just the inevitable consequence of changing childhood. You know, I'm going to be saying that nonstop when I'm getting paid for it. I'm going to be saying it when I'm not getting paid for it. I'm going to be saying it when I'm sick. I'm going to be saying it when I'm well. I'm going to be saying it when I'm morbid and suicidal. I'm going to be saying it when I'm overjoyed and blissed out. And as they put my coffin in the ground or into the fire pit or wherever it goes, you'll probably still hear the last whisper of the same shit coming out of my mouth, which is change childhood and you change the world. And I love it.
Change birth to
I
change
gotta
the
tell
earth.
you, yes. Well, I've always been, you know, a jack of all trades and a master of none, because I see enormous potential in changing adolescence. Gigantic. Even though half of the adolescents are filled with birth trauma, and yet vocational healing is immense. Doesn't mean that we don't carry great scars and that we have relationship issues from our childbirth trauma, but we still have enough equipment to create a completely different society, even with a lot of our traumas and scars. So I care about all of those. That's why it's 7 rites of passage, not 1 in my course. And I can't find one being kind of more important than the other. They like build on each other. So then I think, you know, I'm not the only person doing this kind of stuff. There's changes from all over the place. And it's not where I look. It's, you know, there's these ecstatic people changing science. There are these ecstatic people changing agriculture from degenerative to regenerative. Every time I hear them speak, they sound like they're on the edge of ecstasy. They make love with their fields because they don't plant crops, they plant ecosystems. They are overjoyed about the biodiversity of their soil as they grow their soil into carbon sinks. I hear them speak. They bring their own healing in their own area. So we have to look at what's happening where we least expected, because it is really, really happening. I hear, you know, people in business, these corporate types with bloody suits and ties who smoke cigars, but they're ecstatic about circular economy. And they go, we figured out how to make almost zero waste, and we're figuring out how to make zero waste. We make more money making zero waste. Everything is useful. Plus, I'm really happy at work because we're treating people nice. So I'm happier. It's not just me, it's us, it's we. So there's all these areas. You know, I'm just one dude working on childhood reform because that's what I'm keen on. And there's all people working on from all, you know, and there's birth specialists, and I love specialists. There's like attachment parenting specialists. I love those people. Quite a bit of the attachment stuff. Do you know when a movement dies, sometimes it dies and it's just sad. Sometimes it dies because it becomes mainstream. A lesser version of it, not as good as it used to be, but becomes multiplied by 1 trillion. So it's like the attachment and parenting movement, which is so kind of bizarre, radical hippies. You start to smell a lot of that stuff in the mainstream. And they don't call it a movement and they don't call it attachment, but you're seeing it. But it's too slow. It's devilishly frustrating for us because we die so young. We die after a bloody bleep on the planet and we don't get to see the outcome. That's part of the great frustration. So I get bounced between hope and complete despair several times a day. And I don't think it's important. I think, and I'm not alone. I'm just doing my bit. And so I've found none of the good news is shown, none of it. You have to be really aggressive about your good news. You have to go hunting for it, and don't hunt in the familiar places. And we live as creatures on the soil, but sometimes you suffocate unless you go really high and pan out and see what's happening from the bird's eye view. And then, oh my goodness, some things are moving here. My movement hit a wall, but mine is not the only. There's a we. There's a large we. That was my short answer. Thanks, Dave.
Don't hold back.
Okay.
But can I just say something briefly about rights?
Super quick, Dave, because I want to hear from other people. And,
Okay.
and
No, that's all right. I'll pass.
Clock is ticking.
I'll pass.
Okay.
I want to hear from other people too.
Appreciate you, man.
I'll
Thank
give you
you.
a one-on-one about the French Revolution and the UN's.
You're gonna give me hell.
Right.
You're gonna give me hell later on. I know that's coming. So I'll be seeing you in a few days anyway.
No, you can avoid that just by not answering the phone.
All right. Who's next?
Nicole, do you want to ask your question?
Where's Nicole? Yeah. Hi, Nicole.
Hi. It wasn't so much of a question, but and Robin sort of said some of what I wanted to respond with, that, yeah, like this. And I think, David, your answer was in your own expression, because you said something about the cross-pollination of multidisciplinary, people in multidisciplinary fields. And yeah, I just wanted to respond with it. Pretty much what Robin said was that, it's not tangible. It's not something, the effect of sharing these ideas is not something that we can really pin down, but it is there. And, I mix with a lot of younger families still giving birth and things like that. I work in the birthing field, and, it is becoming much more mainstream in so many ways, like,
in New South Wales. Now, you sound Australian, Nicole, and I don't know what state you're in, but I just said this shocked me. In New South Wales, hospitals have started to support home birth. What? The last time I looked, they were destroying home birth midwives by making their insurance premiums entirely impossible to reach, which was a ploy to make them all disappear. That was my moment of despair. And I thought, great, the Antichrist has taken over the planet. And then, next thing I know, the hospitals are supporting home. Who knows? Maybe they're doing it for the wrong reason, because it's cheaper that way or something. But
yeah,
but the fact that it's allowed.
Both is happening. There is like backward steps and forward steps all at the same time. But the forward steps
and the mainstreaming of a movement feels like a backward step because it looks like it disappeared.
That's right. And also, there's parts of it that we can kind of roll our eyes and go, oh God, like, now it's trendy, like to have like lights at your home birth, but actually what, fairy lights. But then we can sort of go, oh my God, the information about like dim, safe birth spaces has become integrated to the point where it's hip, and this is a good thing. And there are so many positive things going on in both the birth space and the parenting space. And like, it's not linear, it's circular, it's messy.
Nicole, have you noticed a trend? I mean, I want to run this past you because I see it so much. I wonder how much is this a trend? That in terms of influence, in terms of growing a new way of doing things, it usually begins by people adopting it for shallow reasons.
Yeah.
Because it's cool or trendy and it's really hip. It begins that way. And we look at it, if you feel you know, that thing of soft lighting, for instance, you feel it deep in your heart. Yes, you just know, you understand in your sinews why that's important. And then it's discouraging when people are doing it because it's cool. Look at me, I've got the cool. But it begins that way. And then it's from this, it's shallow surface, it starts to sink in deeper.
Yeah, there are many things about our parenting practices or our birth practices that you know, like if we go way, way back in the development, people didn't necessarily understand why it was. They didn't understand all the psychology behind it, but it was imprinted and given down by generations. And when we make something hip or trendy, this is another form of communication and imprinting that we are handing to our subsequent generations.
It is an early stage in the social evolution. It's a kind of a birth pang of then something becoming accepted in a more visceral sense. So it begins shallow, but it's got to begin somewhere. And it's still a sign of forward movement. Not good enough, but then, you know, we start from not good enough. At least it's a start. So I see that as little green shoots. The other thing that's changing all over Australia, I'm really noticing that people don't hit their children anymore, and that's profoundly significant. They do, but that it's walking away fast to the point that a lot of people have this assumption that it's against the law to hit a child, which is not true in Australia. But I never
yeah, and in general the ways that people talk and like the use of shame and things like that, like so for example, I watched a documentary about Sinead O'Connor the other day, and it was full of media clips of her different interviews and appearances, and it was profound. Like, this is only in the 80s, right? But it was profoundly obvious and disgusting the way that the presenters were speaking to her and belittling her. This is even before her big, you know, ripping of the Pope's picture, like, but just even talking to her about her shaved head. And we have moved so far when we look at those media clips of how people, you know, spoke to each other. And so when you apply that to parenting, it's the same. And yeah, I just feel like, yeah, there is a lot of hope. There is a lot of reasons to be hopeful. And there are a lot of young people who are taking up the mantle. And it's quite possible that, you know, when you move in certain circles, you don't necessarily have contact with them, but it's there. And I also suffer from hope. And I think a lot of the information you presented here was great. I really love the conceptualization of, you know, the 7 rites of passage of the different ways in which our wounding plays out. And I'd love to join. I'm about to go overseas, so I'm not sure. But it'll
always be there, Nicole. On Kate is recording it and editing, and Kate and Brett will produce it a bit, so it'll be a finished product at the end. I want to you've triggered me to want to make some comments about the large picture. I see some negative trends also that hurt me and frighten me. You know, namely, well, just to name one, things to do with social media and screen abuse, which is, it freaks me out because it's actually damaging brains. It's it harms the brain's ability to do the essential thing of paying attention and being still and allowing things to be slow. So there are negative trends that really, really worry me, and there are a lot of these positive trends that I'm seeing that you and I were talking about that are great. In my course, I relate a lot to, you know, what is the shared wounding that is being resolved and how, And even these symptoms, where does that come from? You know, the shared vulnerabilities, like even the fact of how we allow ourselves to lose our minds in front of a screen. Not that I don't appreciate it. Look, here we are on the internet on a screen. I appreciate that aspect. I don't like seeing people sitting together, everyone doing this. It's so awful, so awful. And it's compelling and addictive and ruinous. And there's a wounding that reflects. A very early shock, and I want to talk about in my course. So my concluding remark, because I see what time that we have arrived at, is I do want to really invite you to remember about playing with that phrase of what happens in your concerns, in your worries, the things that scare you most about where we are collectively. What happens when you cross out the word I and you say we? And try the different levels of we: family, community, society, nation. Nation, that's a funny word. Humanity, species, right? We. Without that, you will fail to appreciate the immensity of your power. Simply because in your striving to bring more love to the world than what is being shared in it, in your striving, in whatever part of you, if you have a little part of you that's kind of sort of like a social activist wishing for a better world, whatever part of you strives and makes an effort in that direction, you will never see the ripples you create. Only the ripples that go out so far. You won't know all of the things that the children that you have impacted, how, because of you, how they will treat others so far away from what you can see, or even after you have died. If we don't, on a daily basis, practice the remembrance of we, that's at the seat of our discouragement. And there is a very persistent misbelief that if all you are as a parent, your contribution doesn't amount to all that much. So the important people are the heroes, right? You know, the Nelson Mandelas of this world who get their photographs up on screens and who say really important things that end up on Facebook memes. Those are the people that make the difference. Little you. And that is the cosmic hilarity. But we don't get that without. We have to remind each other, well, there is you, and it only works when you are a separate you. That's individuality is an organ of your being. It's not the totality. And your health comes from remembering how to totally forget the you-ness. There's a we at motion, at play. And then insignificance is one of the most silly. Personal insignificance is such a silly illusion. Closer that I come to understanding the holographic nature of existence. And You know, let's use this title word of saving. When you save yourself, you save the world. When you save the world, you save yourself. And it's both. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit, I don't know. Does that sound a little bit flaccid? It's a cliche. But when you contemplate that, the depths of what that phrase actually means in the real world it's a deep remembrance. It's so profound, so very profound. I was hearing the story of Beethoven, profoundly neurotic, deeply troubled, lonesome, broken man who found his salvation through his vocation. He was a shockingly traumatized guy, a hideous childhood. But in devoting his days to creating sublime music, and was he creating or was he hearing it and translating it for us? That's what actually saved him, and he died so like a supernova. He's died like, I've heard that as he died, he raised his fist to the sky and went, and that was literally his final breath. That is the chronicle. He was on fire. And if your body has the enzyme for Beethoven's music so that it does impact you, because not everybody loves it, but if you are shaped such that Beethoven permeates your insides, you'll know what that means. That by the thing that how he saved himself is how he saved us. He said, this is the music of the universe. This is what it sounds like. This is a window through which you hear godness, which, whatever that means to you, I don't know what it means. Okay, so there's some really ecstatic kind of edges that, you know, that we're evoking in this kind of conversation. And but I have promised I would knock off after an hour and a half. And Kate, I'm getting better at this because I've only gone over by 7 minutes. So, you know, that there is hope, right?
There is hope.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this is the end of our evening together. And thank you, Robin, for another wonderful talk from all your interesting ideas about the world and about the self.
Tell us a little bit, tell us just how can people find you and the Rites of Passage course to read about it?
Well, you can go to PPN Center, preperinatalcenter.com, and click on the little link there, the little image of the 7 Rites of Passage that we have made. You can just click on it and it will take you right to the online school. For those of you who are on right now, you can just click the link I put in the chat. But it's, I'll send everybody out the link when they get the recording as well. But I hope you will join us. We just would love to have people to help us craft it. As you see, Robin is best in relationship when he's teaching. The we of it will probably make it better. So please come.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have really enjoyed seeing all of you or feeling you all there. I don't know if I got to see everyone's face, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Kate and Brett, for organizing this so brilliantly. You're the backbone. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Good night, everyone.